For a long time, I found myself puzzled by something that seems almost too simple to notice. The Bible begins in a garden, and it ends in a city. If the garden represents what is good, why does the story not conclude there? Why does it move toward walls, foundations, gates, architecture, towards something unmistakably human and cultural? That question stayed with me. And when I began reading Scripture as one continuous narrative rather than as a collection of separate theological and historical units, I began to see that this movement is not accidental. From the opening lines of Genesis to the closing vision of Revelation, I see the Bible as telling a single, continuous story, one about how human beings are meant to live within creation. It isn't primarily a book of abstract doctrines, nor a timeless collection of moral sayings. When I read it carefully, I notice it is a narrative shaped by land, food, work, power, trust, and time. Its images are concrete and earthy, gardens and rivers, flocks and fields, bricks and cities, deserts and walls. When these images are considered together rather than in isolation, a clear and striking arc appears. The Bible begins in a garden filled with trees and ends in a city built of gold and precious stones, yet still centered on a river and trees that bear fruit in every season. Between these two bookends lies the long, painful, and instructive story of human history, and it is a story that I find both deeply practical and profoundly challenging. The Garden of Eden is the point where the Bible begins, and I've often returned to it in thought because it sets the stage for everything that follows. It isn't wilderness, but a cultivated space planted by God Himself. The rivers water the land naturally, without complex irrigation. The trees grow without effort. Food is abundant, freely available, and yet not taken for granted. Humanity's role in this garden is expressed in two verbs, to work it and to keep it. These words, in the Hebrew, do not suggest exploitation or production quotas. They describe attentive care and faithful guardianship. There is no market. There is no ownership. There is no accumulation, and no anxiety about the future. Time is not experienced as a scarce resource. The goodness of creation is declared before humans have done anything to earn it. I am struck by this. The world is good because it is ordered, relational, and non-extractive. Life is not something to seize, it is something to receive. Yet, even this perfect beginning is not the goal of the biblical story. Eden is the starting point, the condition before history begins. Once trust is broken, once humans reach for autonomy rather than reception, the conditions that made Eden possible disappear. The ground resists cultivation. Labor becomes painful. Mortality enters human experience. Humanity is expelled from the garden, not as a cruel punishment, but as an acknowledgement that innocence cannot coexist with moral fracture. From that moment on, human beings must live in history. The Bible never commands a return to Eden. It never imagines salvation as a reversal to prehistory. Instead, it follows humanity into a world where survival, power, and meaning must now be negotiated. The first fully developed alternative to Eden appears in Egypt. To me, Egypt always represents the pinnacle of what I would call the extractive economy. On the surface, it is fertile, organized, and technologically advanced. The Nile floods predictably, producing a surplus of grain that can be stored and managed. It looks like success, even prosperity. Yet, when I read the biblical account, I see something very different. Egypt is consistently framed as a system in which abundance is maintained through control. Land is centralized. Food is monopolized. People are reduced to labor units. Security replaces trust. Survival is exchanged for freedom. The story of Joseph brings this logic into sharp focus. During the famine, grain distribution leads, step by step, to the consolidation of land, livestock, and people under Pharaoh's authority. What begins as emergency management gradually becomes permanent structure. By the time Exodus opens, this system has matured into forced labor, population management, and the dehumanization of ordinary people. Brick quotas rise. Labor intensifies. Human beings become expendable inputs. Egypt, in my reading, is not condemned because it is wealthy or well-organized. It is condemned because it secures life through domination rather than dependence on God. It is an economy that promises stability at the cost of dignity. The Exodus is therefore not simply a political liberation. It is liberation from a particular economic imagination, the belief that life must be controlled, stored, and extracted in order to survive. Between Egypt and the Promised Land lies the wilderness, and this space is anything but accidental. I see it as a deliberate, formative stage. In the wilderness, Israel is stripped of the mechanisms that made Egypt possible. There are no granaries, no irrigation systems, no markets. Instead, food appears daily as manna. It cannot be stored. If you try to hoard it, it rots. Every single day requires renewed trust. The Sabbath interrupts productivity entirely, imposing a rhythm of rest that has no economic justification at all. Water comes from rocks. Survival is decoupled from human control. The wilderness is, to me, moral re-education. It dismantles the habits of fear and accumulation learned in Egypt. It teaches dependence before abundance, obedience before prosperity. Only after this long, painstaking reorientation does the narrative introduce the next image of blessing, the land flowing with milk and honey. This phrase, a land flowing with milk and honey, is grounded in the concrete ecology of the ancient Levant. It is not a metaphor for luxury or indulgence. Milk points to pastoral life, goats and sheep, herding, mobility, renewable sustenance. Milk flows only where grazing land exists, herds are healthy, and violence is restrained. Honey, in Hebrew devash, does not primarily mean honey from bees. It refers overwhelmingly to date syrup or fruit reductions. Producing it requires cultivated orchards, reliable water, and patient long-term land investment. Date palms take years to mature. Fruit syrup is the result of settled agriculture and intergenerational continuity. Milk and honey together describe a mixed subsistence economy in which pastoralism and agriculture coexist. This balance creates resilience. It spreads risk. It resists both nomadic scarcity and imperial monoculture. It is neither wild abundance nor industrial extraction. It is measured sufficiency. And yet, this land is not paradise. It demands work. Fertility can fail. Prosperity can be lost. Biblical law constantly reminds us that the land belongs to God. Israel is a tenant community, not an owner. Land may not be sold permanently. Debts must be released. Fields must rest. Widows, orphans, and foreigners are protected not merely by charity, but by structural provisions embedded in the economy. In this vision, prosperity is not a reward detached from responsibility. It is a trust. The land responds to human behavior. Justice leads to fruitfulness. Exploitation leads to drought, famine, and exile. The land itself bears witness. But this balance does not last. Israel demands a king. Samuel warns them clearly, kings will tax, conscript, and accumulate. They will seize land and labor. As monarchy develops, cities grow, trade expands, and wealth concentrates. The logic of Egypt quietly returns, now clothed in covenant language. Palaces and temples centralize surplus. The rural balance erodes. The land of milk and honey begins to resemble the systems Israel was delivered from. The prophets emerge as the sharpest critics of this drift. Their accusations are not abstract. They speak of land seized unjustly, wages withheld, luxury built on oppression. They connect moral failure directly to ecological breakdown. Fields wither. Rains fail. Cities rot from within. Exile is not arbitrary punishment. It is the systemic consequence of abandoning the moral and ecological order. When land becomes commodity and people become means, collapse follows. Yet the prophetic vision does not end with ruin. It looks forward. The prophets imagine a future in which the goodness of the land is restored, without fragility. People build houses and live in them. They plant vineyards and eat their fruit. Mountains drip with sweet wine. Rivers heal the land. Work remains, but anxiety disappears. Children are not taken prematurely. Violence recedes. Knowledge of God fills the earth. This is not a return to Eden. Labor remains. History is not erased. The curse is lifted. Scarcity no longer drives hoarding. Fear no longer governs economics. Time itself is healed. In the New Testament, the focus shifts from land to kingdom, yet the imagery stays resolutely agricultural. Seeds are sown. Fields are harvested. Banquets are prepared. Daily bread replaces surplus. Anxiety about tomorrow is confronted directly. Wealth is relativized. Trust becomes central. The ethic of milk and honey becomes a way of life beyond a single geography. The Bible's final vision is where all these threads converge. Revelation does not end with a garden reclaimed. It ends with a city descending from heaven. And this, to me, is deliberate and theologically decisive. The city represents human culture, architecture, technology, memory, cooperation, accumulated skill. Nothing human is erased. Everything is transformed. The city is measured. It has walls and gates, streets and foundations. It is built of gold and precious stones, materials that in human history symbolized concentrated labor, power, and hoarded wealth. Yet here, gold is pavement. Precious stones are common. Nothing is scarce. Gates are never closed. There is no temple economy, no market cycle driven by fear. A river flows through the city, and trees grow along its banks, bearing fruit in every season for the healing of the nations. Nature and culture are no longer opposed. History is not undone, but redeemed. What began as gift, passed through trust, collapsed into exploitation, and groaned under empire, is finally healed. When I look at the modern neoliberal world through this narrative, the contrast is stark. Land has become commodity. Labor has become cost. Time is monetized. Growth is treated as inherently good. Limits have disappeared. Freedom often masks new forms of dependency. The result is exhaustion, ecological collapse, widening inequality, burnout, quiet despair. Biblically speaking, This resembles a late imperial moment, not the birth of injustice, but its maturity. The Bible has seen this pattern before, and it does not respond with nostalgia or denial. It responds with exposure and hope. The arc from garden to city is not circular. It moves forward. The end is not innocence restored, but wisdom fulfilled. Not nature without culture, but culture that has learned to live within creation. The city does not disappear. It becomes a place where life is no longer extracted, hoarded, or feared. The final image is not escape from the world, but the world healed. A city that has learned how to be a garden.